You like your F1. We got a blockbuster race for the season opener, but there were several plots that we got to pick at. Hajar, all the rookies, as near as makes no difference. Max's performance notwithstanding, having a B spec car. So too, we've got to put some respect on Lando Norris's name. Helmut Marko talking about how long he expects it to take Red Bull to bridge the gap to McLaren, ostensibly the quickest car on the grid in the MCL39. We've got to talk about the chaos at Ferrari, chat. What are we doing here? In fact, let's broach that topic first. I cannot believe that Ferrari can be so chaotic. I think that's the appropriate word, is it not? Chaotic. They were nothing if not that. The team messages, the poor performance, the development over the course of the weekend, the interaction with the bloody drivers, plan B, plan C, plan D, plan Z. What are we doing here? Look, let me say this. Again, Lewis wasn't brilliant this weekend, nor was Charles, but they didn't have the minerals, the machinery underneath them. What Ferrari, it seemed they failed to do is develop the car over the course of a weekend to build themselves a program as you do around street circuits. That was their travail. That is the altar at which their weekend failed. But as far as the communication with the drivers, look, we know oldest truism in F1 history is that you need to free up the bandwidth of the drivers. They can do what they do, push the car at 10 tenths. In order to do that, you got to give them a machine first and foremost. Cross, as far as Scuderia Ferrari concerned. Secondly, you need to be cute with your communication with them in real time. They are pushing the car. It's a rain-strewn race. There are circumstances. There are changing variables. That's all you want your Lewis and your Charles to be thinking about. You have them communicating, telling them about switch to case it. What's that? What is that even? Lewis is like, what are you talking about? How about you just leave me to it? I will figure this out. This stuff that you're telling me over the radio is not important. Not at least not important as me keeping it on the black stuff. What are you talking about? You could hear Lewis's frustration boiling to the surface. SH1T car, even worse communication, poor strategy. What are they even good at this stage? We spoke about the halo effect and Sir Lewis Hamilton and his Instagram bits and bobs. Ferrari were doing a brilliant job pre-season of marketing, sending their share price up. Well, how about we match that effort with on-the-track performance? What is going on, Ferrari? I can't even blame, as much as I'd love to talk about Sir Lewis. I mean, I felt bad for the chap and modern-day journalese in that car. They were struggling at every single turn, fighting more fires with their own team than they were on track. What are we doing here? Absolute nonsense. And then you heard Charles Leclerc say, we need to fix this. This is not good enough. We're an F1 team, not an F2 team. Let's talk about the communication specifically. Charles says, what's going on with this water in my car? The response from his race engineer, well, I think it's just the water. Of course he meant the water bottle, but be precise with your language, sir. These guys don't have the bandwidth to do a translation exercise in real time. Am I being too harsh here, chat? I beggars belief, genuinely. I don't want to go scorched earth. It's too early in the season. But I could not believe what I was hearing on that radio. Yeah, the race engineers were trying to help, but finesse the message. Understand with whom you are speaking and amend the message, the how and why of it accordingly. This is what GP nails with Maximilian Verstappen. This is why they have that older brother, younger brother relationship. Because GP understands what Max is dealing with in the car and he will finesse his message accordingly. If Max is struggling, he will shorten it. Make sure it's curt and succinct. If Max asks for new information, extended dialogue, GP will give him that. 2 or 3 times during the Australian Grand Prix, Lewis said, don't give me any more information. And it wasn't just Sir Lewis, because Charles Leclerc was saying exactly the same thing. Stop with the information overkill. Ferrari need to sort this out. And it looks worse because of all the marketing hyperbole even. Sort your life out, Scuderia Ferrari. I tell you what concerned me. Before we got into this season, I recalled not long ago, 12 months ago, that Ferrari were talking all this bluster, that they've got this design philosophy tree up which they're barking, that they've seen CFD information and wind tunnel data that means that they don't need to do the pull suspension rod at the front. And I said then, that doesn't make sense to me. That it's been long established that that's the meta. Again, if you have Adrian Newey in your class, then copy his homework. This isn't calculus. This is counting basics. Ferrari said that they were going to plough their own furrow. How did that work out? Well, it didn't work out well, because now in the final year of these rules and regs, only now are they catching up to the meta that is putting pull suspension rod at the front. What are we doing? But a pull rod suspension at the front now? How long do you want to catch up to the meta? The final year of this rule and reg set, honestly, I think there's something going on at Ferrari. Oh, and by the way, if you need more context, how long do these team principles at Scuderia Ferrari tend to last? 3 years-ish on average. Binotto, Arriba Bene didn't last too long, especially if they weren't winning silverware and didn't foster good rapport with their drivers. What is this now, chat? First race of the season, already it is chaos at the red team with the yellow badge and the black prancing horse atop. Absolute chaos. You imagine Lewis going back to Milan tonight? Like, mate, you won't. And again, races are coming thick and fast. Lest we forget that we've got 5 in 6. What are we doing? I can't even, like, honestly, genuinely, how could they be so bad? No car, no communication, no strategy, nothing from the red team. So Lewis Hamilton must be looking over the way at the boys from Brackley and Brixworth and thinking, what did I do? All of a sudden, George Russell looks like he's got it in a market-leading car. Kimi Antonelli driving from 16th to 5th. How is Kimi Antonelli in the first race of the season, chat, beating Sir Lewis Hamilton, 7-time champion? Houston, I think we have a problem. Macon, it's chaos. I think you're right, Macon. I think too many things were lost in translation. It was the water bottle. It was the setting that Lewis doesn't even know yet. What are we doing? Surely you finesse the decision. If this is a team capable of winning races and therefore championship, holding itself to account, the upper echelon of motorsport globally, surely you understand as a racing engineer how to package your communication up so that the person receiving it receives it in the way most palatable. This for me is basics. I don't think we're talking complicated things here, or at least I hope we aren't. Although under the umbrella term of Scuderia Ferrari, on all of the bluster and marketing and luxury brand that comes with that, simple things often become very difficult. Martin Brundle says of Frederick Vasseur saying this, and he was quite happy with Lewis Hamilton's performance, that there's no way that Frederick Vasseur and Ferrari can be happy with Lewis Hamilton's performance. Martin Brundle says, I mean, they're saying that they're incredibly happy, but, you know, he was 8th on the grid, 9/10 off pole behind his teammate. Stop pointing the lens at Lewis Hamilton here. You know that I will be honest and open, never sacrificing objectivity or truth value at the altar of partisanship, but this is not Lewis Hamilton's fault. He's brand new in the team, for Pete's sake. If you've been able to communicate good strategy, good messages to the drivers, you'd have been doing that last season, and you have not been. Charles Leclerc's been complaining about it all the while. So what are we doing here? Charles Leclerc now imploring his team to fix this, fix the development of the car, fix for the communication, fix for the SH1T strategy. Jorge out here. When will Horner be on the hot seat? La humanidad. Oh, the humanity. Jorge will talk about Christian Horner because some of those decision making is getting a bit techie. But I run around third base on this Ferrari thing because beggars belief on how bad they were on the first race of the year. Here's hoping that this is an anomalous circumstance. Yeah, I shouldn't be going scorched earth. Not just yet. You need to judge them in longer form. Maybe they pick up their head from the parapet and crack on in China in a few days' time, and Suzuka shortly thereafter too. And again, maybe the circumstances will suit them more, but Sector 3 is their territory, right? Long straights, right hand, low minimum speed turns. That's what Ferrari are supposed to do properly. Maybe they didn't adjust for the changing climatic circumstances. Maybe. But this Scuderia Ferrari, Frederick Vasseur et al., Lewis, Charles, you're all in it together. Lewis must be looking at them like, what am I even here doing? Can you imagine Anthony Hamilton, Lewis's first race, by the way, in the Scuderia Ferrari overalls? Anthony Hamilton must be looking at this like, what are we doing? What's going on here? You don't hear my boy Lewis Hamilton telling you to leave me alone. Honestly, the humanidad, for real. For real, it's chaotic and it makes me feel sad, deeply saddened inside. My heart has an upside down smiley face. Oh, and by the way, I'm going to talk about the rookies. Listen, it was always going to be difficult. First race of the season, first race of their F1 careers. It was always going to be super difficult for the likes of Jack, for the likes of Ollie Behrman, Antonelli too, bloody Bortoletto, all of them. It was always going to be chaos. But Isaac Hadjar has been on the receiving end of the worst of it. You saw him do his best Lance Stroll impression, right? Brazil 2024, Bartek, hot take, Toto team to finish it. I don't even think that's a hot take, Bartek. I mean, you can take that to the bank straight away that the Mercedes pairing finish ahead of Scuderia Ferrari based upon what we've seen not long at the Australian Grand Prix, Albert Park this morning. I mean, take that to the bank. Let's talk about Isaac Hadjar. Look, coming into this season, the knock on Isaac Hadjar was as quick as he is. He's almost as temperamental, equally so. Mercurial. Always hear that dude on the radio losing his mind, just like Tsunoda-san. And again, befitting since the both are a driver pairing, teammates even. However, Isaac Hadjar F2, everybody says he was the quickest that year, but there were mistakes in there, and you know that winning a race isn't always necessarily by dint, not only and exclusively of your ability to drive an F1 car or an F2 car in this case quickly. It's more stuff than that. It's mental fortitude, mention no names, Lando Norris 2024 iteration of. It's composure, it's resilience, it's the ability to bounce back, the ability to politic. And I want to talk to this very specifically with Isaac Hadjar. I've leveraged the criticism that I don't think that this dude is common sense epitomized. Why? And it's me being harsh, but you've got to be with these drivers, especially if accountability is a thing and success is gained at the altar of it. Isaac Hadjar had an opportunity today and he flopped it. How are you going to yeet it into the barrier on the formation lap? Okay, so it's rainy. Balance, Cameron. Give the dude some grace. First race in F1, moreover, of course. And he is a talent, but to yeet it into the barrier on the formation lap. Lance Stroll settings, not good enough, but that's forgivable. What I don't forgive Isaac Hadjar for, he's got the helmet on right. You saw Lewis Hamilton peeved in free practice, jumped out the car, kept his helmet on, visor down. You could see in his body language, the haunch shoulders, that he was none too pleased with himself or his team. Isaac Hadjar had the opportunity to jump out the car, visor down. Nobody could have seen your tears, Isaac. We wouldn't have known. Between your face, you have the barrier of a helmet and a visor. Nobody would have known. Nobody would have been any the wiser. None of the F1 community, nor the press and the media. What did Isaac Hadjar do? Visor up, sobbing face. What are we doing? Maybe I'm being daft here. Of course he was sad. Of course he's denied himself on his debut in Formula One. Of course he's going to be devastated. But you race for a Red Bull Racing junior team. This stuff is going to matter. Christian Horner cares not for all this nonsense. He doesn't want to see this. Excuse me. Don't want to see this. Nor does bloody Helmut Marko. And you see Helmut Marko, I'll tell you, a legend. Matt's with a podium in Australia. Not a bad start. China should fit Red Bull more. I'll tell you, we'll come to that. Because there are things that we've got to normalise for. And some things I've got to address. Leverage an apology at Lando Norris. Because he wasn't too bad today. Let me do Isaac though. Surely Isaac, if we're leveraging common sense, visor down, nobody needs to see. Helmut Marko wouldn't know to call you an embarrassment. And again, Helmut Marko shouldn't be saying that, right? But grace isn't something that runs rife at the bulls that are red. Helmut Marko was never going to be pleased for that. Isaac Hadjar knows this. He's come up for the Red Bull Junior program, just as Liam Lawson has. It is a pressure cooker, suffocatingly so. I mean, why would you do that then, Isaac? And again, I don't think this is difficult stuff that we're talking about. This is me just connecting some common sense dots. Jump out the car then, Isaac Hadjar. Cry away, trap. Sometimes you've got to cry. Do you know what I mean? Emotion isn't a weakness. Indeed, it's a strength if leveraged in the right direction and packaged appropriately. But there are politics in F1. It's a piranha's tank. Isaac Hadjar did himself no favours today. Cry away, chap. Just flick the visor down and keep your helmet on. And nobody would know any different. Now you have Helmut Marko saying that it was an embarrassing circumstance. Helmut Marko was the leader, the head of the Red Bull Junior program, shouldn't be saying such things, but you know who that chap is. If someone shows you who they are, then believe them in the first instance. You're always going to get a cheeky quotable like that from Helmut Marko, and Isaac should look to make his life easier, not more difficult. Therefore, keep your visor down, chap. Forgive him for the bloody mistake on track. It happens. It happened to them all. Duan, but apart from bloody Kimi Antonelli and Ollie Behrman, but the rest of the four rookies on the grid, 4 of 6, all yeeted it out. DNF settings, because it was a difficult race. It was always going to happen. Isaac Hadjar, though, make your life more simple, sir. Travel the line of least resistance. For F1 is complicated, beset on both sides by the travails of politicking and resilience and or lack thereof. Let me talk about Maximilian. In fact, let me talk about Lando Norris first. I owe that helmet is a tool heavy. Chiba says, how about Liam Lawson's continuing trend in that number 2 seat? Go on, let's talk about the Red Bull circumstance. I want to talk about Lando first, because Lando Norris at the press conference said something that I thought was really, really pertinent. He used the word new when speaking of the circumstance that was consolidating for his pole position off the line, brand new. When fending off a fire-breathing dragon in the latter stages of the Grand Prix, that's a new circumstance for Lando. And more to the point, and more pertinently, what was new is the way in which Lando Norris now, I've got to retire the moniker, was able to respond. Chaos, ladies and gentlemen. Back in 2024, I was talking to Shez offline. Back in 2024, I would argue that Lando Norris did not have that in his locker. It was a difficult circumstance of a race, changing variables, that the parameters as far as the automotive pugilism Rubik's Cube, for which Lando Norris had to solve, were changing at every single turn. It was wet and then it was drying. He had Max behind him and then he had Oscar. It was team orders that he had to leverage. Do I pit? Don't I pit? And again, he had to tick. There were loads of opportunities to give away this race. I would argue that Lando would have given it away in 2024. The challenge that we put forth to Lando Norris going into 2025 was, can he solve for some of the ills that cost him a championship in 2024? You know them. We've talked about them ad infinitum at this point. Defensive posture, aggressive defensive manoeuvres into turn 1 to consolidate for a pole position at the end of lap 1. How does he handle the pressure in the face of a fire-breathing dragon in Max Verstappen? He was brilliant in Abu Dhabi, but Max Verstappen was nowhere near him then in 2024. Can Lando Norris solve for those things? He's been criticised for having mental fortitude or a lack thereof, not handling those pressurised circumstances. Sochi 2021, not listening to his team. Tick, tick, tick. He proved in this race at Albert Park that he can do all of those things. Balance, settings. Of course, he had the quickest car, anywhere to the tune of 0.2, but that wasn't the battleground on which the Albert Park fight was fought. It was Max, it was Oscar, it was politicking, it was timing, it was keeping it on the black stuff, notwithstanding changeable circumstance. And Lando ticked all of those boxes. Lando Norris was right at the press conference to say that all of those things were new. The circumstances were new, unprecedented for him. And he passed them, chat, with flying colours, made as near as makes no difference. 0 errors. Oh, the humanity. Who's this chap? We need to retire the Lando Norris moniker, because he had Riz for days today. He was brilliant in the car, brilliant in qualifying, and brilliant in the race. Does Lando Norris have it in him to take this, to replicate for this performance over the course of the next 23 races? It's another question. You want to judge these guys in long form, eh? You can't judge them over the course of one race. Anybody can have a brilliant day. Do you know what I mean? Even a broken clock gets it right twice a day. If Lando can keep this up though, but can perform like that each and every single race, then it's going to be difficult for Max in ostensibly a slower car to the tune of 0.2 to beat that chap. Lando is a different Brit. When he's had his Weetabix, we said already, right, 2024, it wasn't for lack of pace or racecraft even. Lando Norris is bloody quick like Charles, quick like Max, quick like a Sir Lewis in his pump. He's top tier, S tier, God tier levels of quick, and we saw that over the course of the weekend. Speed being the great equaliser in F1, but what he lacked, mental fortitude, pressurised circumstance, defending and consolidating for a P1 over the course of a first lap. Tick all of the aforementioned. What are we doing, chat? Is Lando really capable of winning a championship in 2025? On the evidence of today at Albert Park, how can you argue not? Cameron, everyone says Max is aggressive, but wait for Lando. He will crash into Max this season. Why? Because he leads the standing on. We'll talk to that circumstance. Let me get very specific on Lando, though, on lap 1. All the time in 2024, it was passiveness. In his defensive posture and the way in which he defend into turn 1, it was almost like after you, Claude, settings from Lando that came to epitomise the way in which he'd interact with all of the drivers, not least Max Verstappen, particularly on lap 1. It was almost like Lando hadn't warmed up. He hadn't done his Pierre Gasly ball catching drills. Now, though, however, did you see the way in which Lando Norris was moving on lap 1 into turn 1? Chat. Benzi, what do we do? This is chaos. Genuinely. Here's what happened with Lando Norris that I am baffled again. New man, Lando Norris 1.0. I think that's the new moniker. Here's what Lando did. He wasn't even face front. He was looking in his wing mirrors each and every single set. Like he was watching Max Verstappen and covering him off. For a brief millisecond, it looked like Max was going to try and go up the inside of Lando Norris between him and Oscar Piastri. That was on for a second, but because Lando now attentive to the importance of being defensive into turn 1, he's just sat there looking in his wing mirrors. Covers off Max Verstappen with a beautifully subtle move. Max immediately adjusts and goes to the outside. No doing going in between Oscar and Lando. That was always going to be ambitious, always going to be a tad reachy. Max Verstappen therefore switches to the outside. We knew that was coming. 2007, Sir Lewis Hamilton around the outside of Fernando Alonso. Lando's wise to it in an instant. Why? Because he's not even looking at the road in front of him. He's looking for Max and Oscar in his wing mirrors. Oh, the humanity. Where has this dude been? Chat. A brand new Lando. Let's call him Lando Norris 1.0 because he didn't have that in his locker last year. Or if he did, he didn't execute on it. And I think that's chaos, chat. I think we've got to evaluate Lando a little bit differently in real time. If he is that dude and can continue being that dude over the course of the next 23 races in a car that everybody agrees now is quicker than the RB21, at least for now, then oh the humanity. Houston, we have ourselves a problem. So too, per Octane, you got to consider this, right? It's been over 1,000 days since Max Verstappen hasn't been the top dog in the driver's standing. Max is not daft. He is leveraged for that. Indeed, it enables his very unique style of aggressive driving and wheel-to-wheel pugilism. Now, however, for now, Lando Norris 1.0 has the whip hand, and that's got to mean something, lest we forget again, Max has 8 points on his super license. 4, he will get a 1 race ban. He can't afford that. And again, Max has said he'll never change his driving style, but surely on most recent evidence, the fact that Lando has 25 points and Max now has 18, Max will be thinking about this. Already Lando is on the front foot, Max on the back. Now, seeing the post-race press conference, it didn't seem to necessarily affect Max Verstappen, as it shouldn't, for some say soon to be 5-time. And again, he's unwavering in his very unique brand of resilience. But that's Max's gift, right? Here's me, and take me for who I am. I have one job, that's to be an F1 driver, and that is to win. I don't think this will affect him necessarily, not materially so, but there are downstream ramifications of having 18 points as versus 25 in the championship, particularly if Red Bull don't have the quickest car, Octane. Octane saying that Lando will crash. I don't think Lando has it in his toolbox to deliberately crash a Max Verstappen. That's a tax as far as success that I don't think Lando is prepared to pay. Being honest, still too nice of a guy. But again, it's a material differential, a delta per se, versus what we saw from Lando in 2-4 to today. That defensive manoeuvre was subtle but notable. He wouldn't have done it. Not like that. Not last year he wouldn't have, at least. And then How many mistakes did he make? You remember at Singapore, that day he was absolutely brilliant, gapping the rest of the field materially. There wasn't even a race on. It was Lando's to lose. All he needed to do is not make mistakes, and then very nearly he yeeted it into the barrier for want of attention span. Really? That day we chastised Lando Norris for being a mistake merchant, for making errors of the unforced variety. Well, what happened today, chat? I'm being very basic here, putting on my accounting cap and comparing and contrasting. This is just variances. 2024 Lando versus Lando 1.0 that we saw at Albert Park today. One mistake was made. You'd argue you made less mistakes of consequence as versus the other protagonist in the championship, Max Verstappen, who made a serious one, chat. Do you know what I mean? I mean, it's different here. I know that Max is driving around the not insubstantial foibles of that car, understeer settings. It couldn't do sector 3, right angle, low minimum speed turns. Again, never going to be the fare of RB21. And again, it's supposed to be, to a certain extent. You'd expect the MCL39 to be better around sector 3. Indeed, it was. That's where Lando gained the 4/10 in qualifying, is it not? But I don't know. It's techier than techie things. I've never seen, let me just bookend this Lando Norris soliloquy this way. I've never seen Lando Norris do that before. And if he can continue on that, then he can deliver upon the promise of his as of yet unfulfilled potential. So too, if you're Zach Brown and Andreas Stella, they effected for team orders conveniently. Remember the timing? It was like as soon as Oscar had made his mistake, it was like, crack on, Oscar. You can race Lando now. Before then, erstwhile, it was stand down, Oscar J. Like, support Lando in this. We're too close to Max Verstappen behind us. Let's not race. On the back of the evidence of Albert Park, the Australian Grand Prix, race 1 of 2025, how can Zach Brown and Andrea Stella not support the campaign for the Drivers' Championship that is Lando Norris? How can they justify it on the evidence of the Australian Grand Prix, not putting all their Drivers' Championship eggs in the Lando Norris basket? Lando's made their decision for them, at least over the next couple of races. He has goodwill using which he can leverage to hopefully gap Oscar Piastri. It's trouble for Oscar, and I would have loved the Aussie story, right? The homeboy coming and winning a race, but sadly, all of those backing Oscar Piastri, and I've heard a few of them saying Oscar's going to win the championship this year. Note there is a difference. We're not comparing this version of Oscar Piastri with last year's version of Lando Norris. We're comparing OJ Piastri this year in 2025 with Lando Norris 1.0, and there is a difference. Oscar Piastri has a problem on his hands. I don't think he has the minerals, not from a speed perspective, nor from a racecraft perspective, nor from a race aptitude and or IQ perspective. Based on the evidence of Lando Norris today, I will be honest. Let's talk about Max Verstappen, because he could have won that race, you know, chat. Fine margins, really, really fine margins, chat. Genuinely, I was reading an Autosport article and they said, had they pitted Max Verstappen on lap 45 like Red Bull should have, he would have come out in front of Lando. You remember there was a gap. There was a very small gap where they could have pitted Max Verstappen, but I understand why GP didn't do it. Cast your mind back to Brazil and all those rookies still out on track. You're expecting another crash and potentially another red flag, during which you can change your tyres. That was Max Verstappen's gift and Esteban Ocon's gift too at the Brazilian Grand Prix. So I understand why Red Bull made that mistake. Could argue that in real time, focus on the processes, it might not necessarily have even been a mistake. Only with the benefit of hindsight and retrospect do you see that had they pitted Max Verstappen in a car 2 seconds, 0.2 slower than the MCL39, that Max Verstappen would have exited the pits with track position over Lando Norris. Oh, the humanity. How can Max Verstappen keep this so close? Because he's a god-tier peddler. That's why, chat. Yeah, it was circumstances. Yes, these were Max Verstappen's conditions. But the umbrella heading, you've got to have this conversation and couch this F1 mode of discourse in these terms as I outlined them. Max Verstappen pushed that car to a place where... How about Liam Lawson? You guys have heard me say this. I'm going to say it again for the avoidance of doubt. Liam Lawson is the true barometer, just as was Checo Perez, of what this RB21 iteration of car can do. Don't look at Max Verstappen and think, oh, RB21 is a quick car and it's easy to drive, it's balanced and planted. Max Verstappen is an alien. He's an anomaly of an F1 peddler. That's not the barometer. He's out driving that car. See where Liam Lawson is? Oh, he DNF'd. That's what any other driver, 90% of them, would be doing in that car at Albert Park. And in that vein, when you normalise for those variables, you've got to give Max Verstappen props. Indeed, he's in with a shout of driver of the day, is he not? As is the one that they call Alex Albon. Render, Piastri was fast today. They both went off. Piastri felt it the most. That's it. Let's see next race. Reindeer, I think you criticise. Look, hang on. Balance. Oscar Piastri was his sophomore season last year. This is only his third. This is Lando Norris's seventh season. Seventh. That's a lot more experience. You might argue, therefore, if you're comparing apples and apples, that Oscar Piastri in his 7th season would have beat Lando Norris today. But you can't do that. It's a hypothetical argument, right? You've got to compare Lando Norris in his 7th season as versus Oscar Piastri in his 3rd. That's going to be the comparison. Oscar was brilliant today in portions, gapping Lando Norris when he had the opportunity, putting the pressure on Lando Norris, but yet and still close but no cigar. I felt bad for Oscar. I would have loved the win. A rising tide, as far as the narrative floats all F1 boats, doth it not. Oscar Piastri winning the Australian Grand Prix would have made headlines around the world, not just sports one, mainstream ones, front page ones. It would have been a brilliant story. My heart bleeds for Oscar. But now, tonight, Oscar goes to bed realising the enormity of the task that he has before him. Lando Norris, it's his team. McLaren is the house that Lando built. Zach Brown and Andrea Stella will be looking at Oscar Jack with the side eye, even if they won't let him know. Lando is their boy when he can put together a performance like that and fend off a fire-breathing dragon in Maximilian Verstappen with a damaged underfloor, by the way. It gets crazier and crazier. Oh, and by the way, if you look at the post-race press conference, you see the deference that Max now has for Lando. Yeah, they're mates, but there's a different look in Max Verstappen's eye when Lando can put together a performance like that. Nobody's seen Lando move that way, I would argue. Chiba says exactly. That's what I've been saying. He put the pressure on Lando all day. I also rate Norris higher, by the way, but anything can... 100% reindeer. We're talking about the instance that was Albert Park, right? And there are inferences and... I mean, we're extrapolating, but it's an anomalous instance, right? It's one race of 24. If you look back on the first 10 last year, Max Verstappen had it in the bag, right? But then it became the development story. I say all of that to say this. There's takeaways, there's upshots, but again, you can't... Long form is how you want to judge this season. Who's to say that, per Helmut Marko, by the way, that Red Bull won't be challenging McLaren in absolute terms pace within the next 5 races? Those are Helmut Marko's words, not mine. Oh, and by the way, lest we forget, race number 9, flexi-wing rules change, or the parameters within which they have to operate. Before the outboard portion of the front wing, 15mm was the flex. As at race 9, the Spanish Grand Prix, it will be 13mm. The inboard portion reduced flex from 5mm to 3. It's going to get techie, chat. There are going to be loads of peaks and troughs. It can't just be linear. It never has been in F1 and never will be. It's going to get techie. Go on then. There's other bits and bobs that I would need to talk about, eh? Who else is there? Charles Leclerc. Oh, gosh. Go on then. Let's adjust Charles Leclerc. I don't want to criticise. It would be disingenuous of me to criticise the one that they call Charles Leclerc. Charles Edward Cheese in there. Shout out the Go F1 Cam. Appreciate the content, brethren. You're a legend, Charles, and I appreciate you each and every single time. Far too generous, sir. But appreciate you and humbled. Listen, let me say this about... I don't want to criticise either one of the Ferrari drivers. But Charles, again, truth value, objectivity, etc. We will never sacrifice them at any set of cognitive dissonances worth their moniker. But I mean, Charles. Okay, so listen, positive for Charles. He overcame to a certain extent. The car wasn't good. He beat his teammate Sir Lewis Carl Davidson Hamilton, the 7-time GOAT, Mount Rushmore of F1, and that's worthy of mention. It would be disingenuous of me to frame the conversation in any other terms. However, chat, for the longest time, in my humble opinion, the criticism of Charles Leclerc has been as follows. when the team do one of these, implode upon him, Charles Leclerc doesn't raise his game as Michael Schumacher, the original Regenmeister, used to in the original days of Ferrari incompetence. It's almost like when they go lower, to quote the legend that is Michelle Obama, Charles Leclerc goes even lower as far as his ability to pull out performance of himself. They say of the greatest ones in F1 and any other sport, that it's their ability to pull out of themselves the greatness in the moments that matter most. And I would argue that Charles Leclerc allows his team to lower his levels. You can hear the insolence, if that's the word, the incredulity with which Charles Leclerc reacts when he's talking about the water. Yeah, his race engineer let him down. Again, lost in translation for the most part about the water in the car. What are you talking about, mate? Charles Leclerc said to him, well, you can add that to the words of wisdom. They're bantering in real time because Charles Leclerc is not liking what Scuderia Ferrari are giving him. Ergo, a car not capable of winning 25 points and a race engineer not capable of communicating the messages in a way that's succinct, apropos for the chaos of the circumstance. And Charles Leclerc's giving it back in real time. But Charles Leclerc was messy today, chat. You saw the overtaking moves. You know that Lewis Hamilton will be none too pleased at the combative way in which he was raced by his teammate, being hung out to dry, aggressively overcrowded. I don't know where I stand on that. You know what? Charles Leclerc, like George Russell, is combative in nature. He's a racing driver for Pete's sake. 25 points is his goal each and every single race weekend. And if that means he's got to step on his teammate, then that's what's going to happen. Ignore the kind exterior, the model behaviour outside of the cockpit. That is Charles Leclerc outside of it. But there is the dichotomy. He turns into a fire-breathing dragger, a monster in kind and in earnest, inside of the cockpit. However, I would argue, as a Charles Leclerc naysayer, modern day journalese, he wasn't the best today, not the best of himself. I would argue that they're almost mirror image in Lewis and Charles. That if you give them the car, and if you can build around them the circumstances robust enough to the where they're not impacted by dodgy strategic calls, leave them out. Oh, no, come in. Oh, no, indecision, stay out. That's what we saw in FP1 and quali at the hands of Sir Lewis and his race engineer, right? If you can shield Lewis and Charles Leclerc from all that, give them their helmet, let them get in the car and let them drive, then you probably have yourself the strongest driver pairing on the grid. However, if it's a changeable circumstance of a race, changing conditions, strategy changing in real time, the track drying and then wet and then more rain is coming, Class A, Class B, if you have all this chaos around Sir Lewis and Charles Leclerc, aka modern day journalese, then you're not going to get the best out of these drivers. And herein lies the issue. Frederick Vasseur has to get this into his skull. Circle the wagons around ostensibly the best driver pairing in the grid. If we're talking about pace in absolute terms, protect them from all of the chaos. Yeah, they've got to do sponsorship, but when they're in the car, you need to give them minimal info, especially if they're telling you chaps. They said, listen, this is too much information. What you're telling me doesn't matter. I'm not close enough, says Lewis Hamilton, to deploy classification K1. That setting can't help me at this point. I think they're talking about overtaking modes. Lewis Hamilton doesn't even know how to deploy wet settings on the steering wheel. And again, I say all of this to say it's early days for Lewis. Acclimatization settings, is it not? Message it then in a way that's palatable, the way in which Lewis can ingest it in real time with a view to optimise for his very challenging circumstance. Same stands for Charles Leclerc on the opposite, on the other garage. He is wired exactly the same way. He can't be arsed with a difficult car. If it's tough to drive, Charles Leclerc is going to lose 10%, just as Lewis Hamilton did over the past 3 years in a W13 that didn't even have any bloody side pods. Do you know what I mean? In an era where barge boards are made illegal, of course you need side pods, Mercedes. But again, if we're going to talk about Mercedes, chat, can we have this conversation? Colapinto in a Red Bull might challenge Checo 2024 WDC for destruction. Colapinto's got his foibles as well, but they'll put him in. Listen, I feel for Jack Doohan. Let me say about Jack Doohan quickly. I do feel for Jack Doohan. The way that he drove in qualifying, it was reminiscent for me of 2005, 2006 Fernando Alonso. Conan the Barbarian settings, hustling along that car. Jack Doohan gets it. He understands the assignment. He understands that his tenure at Alpine is a poison chalice one. Of course, they've got Franco Colapinto on a long-term reserve driver deal, and that means something. That's a signal of intent, if ever I saw one, at the hands of Fabio Briatore, executive advisor. His charge will be to build up the asset value of Alpine with a view to sell it on as a going concern and entity at some point in the not-too-distant future, let's say 2 to 3 years. To do that best, we know that Fabio will want to promote himself from Franco Colapinto. Good looking, marketable, comes with the Carlos Slim sponsorship and the support of a country in Argentina. Again, they're sniffing around putting a Grand Prix in Argentina, notwithstanding the economic circumstance being difficult. Colapinto therefore makes sense. It's a difficult, no suffocating circumstance for the one that they call Jack Doohan. Therefore, is it not? It's techie. The circumstances are less than ideal, yet and still Jack Doohan goes out there and puts it down. Okay, yeeted it into the barrier. Schoolboy errors from a schoolboy in F1 terms. What else would you expect at this stage? I don't know. If there is a different eventuality that you expect from these rookie drivers in their first ways, all except the one that they call Kimi Antonelli, then I know not of that eventuality. Benzi said, I'd love the idea of Helmut returning as a driver. He wasn't a bad peddler though. Benzi's the worst joke. You know the story already that he had a contract waiting to sign with Ferrari before his big accident when he injured his eye. On the back of the injury with his eye, Alain Prost got the job at Scuderia Ferrari. It's techie. Ferrari will be back in China this year. The driver collects the points like Kimi Raikkonen did in 2003 or Alonso did in 2005 and 2006. I think because it's the last year this rule and reg set. And by the way, far too generous Octane. It's the last year this rule and reg set. Ergo, the drivers will make a difference. But again, you can't. If you're Lewis and Shaw, there's only so much difference you can make, especially when Ferrari are doing what they did this race now. They were chaos merchants. Anyway, look, I've killed the Ferrari circumstance, but I don't disagree with Yotte, and you're far too kind. Let me say this about Kimi Antonelli and Mercedes. Oh, the humanity. For real. For real. Can you imagine Sir Lewis Hamilton going to bed tonight thinking, hang on, I've just left the boys and girls from Brackley and Brixworth. I could have been in that silver arrowed car. I tolerated their nonsense, their incompetence, their inability to build a car capable of winning races and therefore championships for 3 years. It was 0 pod settings. It was a lack of correlation between CFD and the wind tunnel and what they saw in reality. It was continuing in 2023 to bark up a design philosophy tree that had been proven to not work. It was seeing George Russell in an anomalous circumstance in the Brazil Grand Prix in 2022 and making poor low-level decisions. It was having a car not commensurate with the talent, the not insubstantial talents of the 7-time champion, some say GOAT, of Sir Lewis Hamilton. It was him struggling in sector 3, every single qualifying as near as makes no difference. It was ground effect. It was him not being able to deploy the aggressive braking into the braking zone that makes Sir Lewis Hamilton one of the quickest peddlers that we have ever seen. And now look, the opportunity cost is substantial. Maybe he made the decision. You know, I've spoken to serious people, F1 aficionados, more intelligent than I. And here's what they said about Sir Lewis. It's rare that you roll the dice twice as far as decisions that you make of consequence in F1 and roll 2 6s. You'll recall in 2013, 2014, when he moved from McLaren to Mercedes, that was chaos. There was no way that decision should have worked out as successfully and as profitably and fruitful as it did for Sir Lewis. Not in real time. Nobody thought that. All of the God tier aficionados and F1 minds thought that Lewis Hamilton was making a mistake of gargantuan proportions by moving from McLaren. McLaren, with their heritage and legacy, 1988, Senna, Prost, et al., Ron Dennis, they know how to win. Why would you leave McLaren to move to a startup? A young upstart in Mercedes. Yeah, they had the engineering background. Yeah, they're a behemoth as far as the automotive industry. But as F1's different, chat. Who moves from McLaren to Mercedes? That was the headline that was oft put forth at the time, that Lewis Hamilton had made a mistake and his career was going to be gonzo. That this was going to be a story, Lewis Hamilton, when all was said and done, of what might have been. That was what they were going to write on his epitaph as far as his F1 career. It was a bad move, and then it turned out good. Sometimes you do the wrong thing. They said oft about Muhammad Ali, one of the greatest, if not the GOAT, of course, the greatest. I am the greatest. Sometimes you do the wrong thing and it turns out right. Muhammad Ali made a career, no, an industry out of doing it. In 2013, when Lewis moved from McLaren to Mercedes, Lewis did the same thing. He did the wrong thing, but it turned out right with the benefit of hindsight. Now, leaving Mercedes for Ferrari, I argued in real time that that was the move. How long can one man wait for Mercedes to pull their design philosophy finger out of their rear end? Lewis was dealing with a different set of tyre lines now at the ripe old age of 40. He looked Toto Wolff in his face, Toto the boy who cried wolf in his face, and told him as much in a fabled sit-down with the one that they called Martin Brundle. Toto said, as a chief exec, as a shareholder, I'm dealing with the long term. That's why I've got to look at a Kimi Antonelli. I've got to look to build the future. Yeah, you didn't want me to sign George Russell because that upset Sir Lewis Hamilton, who desperately wanted to keep himself some Valtteri Bottas. But Toto said, I've got to build for the future. I'm looking to build legacies here. I need to go to the annual board meeting and justify all of my decisions. And Lewis Hamilton, if we're talking 40 years old, cognitive sharpness is a thing. Nobody lasts forever. Father Time is undefeated, undisputed. Of course, Toto Wolff has to make those decisions that cheese off Sir Lewis Hamilton fans and stands extremists and fundamentalists alike all around the world. Of course, Toto has to make those decisions. And Sir Lewis, conversely, correspondingly, has to make the best ones that fit for him. He had a burning desire in his heart, always has done, to go and drive for the Ferrari team, to put on them their red overalls with the yellow badge and black prancing horse atop. That was always going to be Sir Lewis Hamilton's lot. He needed to go to Milan. He needed to go to Maranello and eat some pasta. Do you know what I mean? Mediterranean salad lunch each and every single time. Of course, it was an itch that he needed to scratch. He's interested in fashion. Live in Milan for a while. You're ticking several boxes at the same time. There's a synergy as far as the Ferrari lifestyle for brand Lewis Hamilton. Lest we forget that he's not a businessman at this stage, 40 years old. Brand Hamilton is a business, man. There is a difference. Shout out to Jay-Z for those lyrics, by the way. Cheeky bit of plagiarism, of course. And so Lewis Hamilton has made that decision. But it's rare, chat, that as far as performance, that you make two big decisions in your career and you roll two sixes both time. That's rare as a circumstance. How many drivers in F1 history have done that? Vettel left Red Bull and the blown off diffuser settings and went to Ferrari and struggled. He warned Sir Lewis that Ferrari is the place where old drivers' careers go to pasture out to. It's going to be tough for Sir Lewis Hamilton. We know the stats already. 3 drivers in F1 history have ever done what Lewis Hamilton's trying to do now. Win a championship, an unprecedented 8th. Unprecedented, remember, that's the pertinent word in this equation. At the ripe old age of 40. Brabham 66, Giuseppe Farina in 1950, Juan Manuel Fangio won his last one in 1957. There's only one driver who's won a championship with 3 teams or more. He has a name and his name is Juan Manuel Fangio. These are unprecedented circumstances up and down the board. He's looking to roll 2 sixes, chat. And I don't know if he's done that, especially on the back of today's evidence. OG Zilla, what's OG Zilla saying? OG Zilla, Max won't have to ask Yuki to move. Go on, I need to talk about Yuki as well. Go on, let me get this Lewis Hamilton thing out the way. Mercedes. I don't know how Sir Lewis goes to bed tonight in his Milan house and doesn't think of what could have been at Mercedes. They look, at the moment at least, they look like they've built a car ostensibly quicker than Ferrari. Now, F1 aficionados, lots of them, are saying that we haven't seen the true pace out of Ferrari, that when we get to China at round 2 and then Suzuka at round 3, potentially we'll see a much quicker Ferrari. The conditions will favour them more. They will develop the car better. They can't be as bad as they were this race weekend as far as the road up which they developed. Do you know what I mean? The setups were chaos. They were super quick. They looked like Mercedes of 2024. Super quick, lest we forget, in free practice. And then when we get to qualifying, their pace goes gonzo, fades to black, fugazi, such that Lewis Hamilton's asking, has something happened to my car? Did somebody turn down the engine? What happened to my tyre temperatures and tyre pressure? All of a sudden, Mercedes, when they looked like they were world beaters, market leaders, the pace would just disappear in the paid sessions. That's Q1, Q2, Q3. It seems like that Ferrari, they've been eating from the same restaurant as Mercedes in 2024. That was them. But that's now, and I don't trust it. I don't like it. So Lewis will be looking at that like this is Groundhog Day. But again, I say for the avoidance of doubt, it's rare that you can make decisions of material consequence like Lewis had. Two of them, McLaren to Mercedes back in the day, 2013, 2014. Now Mercedes to Ferrari in 2025, and roll 2 6s. The probability of you doing that ostensibly, objectively, are very, very low. Mercedes look like they've come up, Lewis Hamilton naysayers are like, and that chap on TikTok, like, look, the problem wasn't Mercedes, Sir Lewis. The problem, some say, was you. And now they have themselves a driver pairing that looks chaos. Kimi Antonelli, remind me, P16 to P5. Oh, the humanity. For real, for real. What are we doing here, chat? The dude looks like Ayrton Senna reincarnate on both levels, aesthetically and in the bloody car. The only one of the 6 rookies on the grid that nailed it and went gangbusters, blockbuster performance from Kimi Antonelli. He looks like an F1 driver already. Lest we forget, he's 18 years old, only just got his civilian license to drive cars on the roads in real life. And then he puts in a performance like that in the wet, works his way through the field as if he's a veteran. Oh, the humanity. I said on Quick Stop F1 once upon a time, shout out to my boy Nasher, that if Toto Wolff has made this decision and it comes off, if Kimi Antonelli turns out to be the next Max or the next Sir Lewis Hamilton, Toto Wolff will be looked upon like a genius. He's speaking fee at the Harvard Business School and Cambridge Uni and Oxford University. He's speaking fee. Well, you've got to add a couple zeros onto it. If Kimi Antonelli is the next one, as he looked like today, then it's chaos. Oh, by the way, how about King George? I've heard from a couple of F1 aficionados, infinitely more wise on all things Formula One than I, that they fancy George Russell to go well in the championship, if not lift the championship trophy at the end of 24 races. Why? Because they fancy him to do an Alain Prost affair, accumulate points over the course of season in a way that's consistent, in a way that makes him difficult to beat. And now pair that thesis with this. It looks like Mercedes have brought a case, so it's cooler climbs. We know Mercedes, as far as its performance, always flatters to deceive when it was cold. And it was cold at Albert Park today because of the rain circumstance. Let's see how they go on at China and Suzuka, when it's more normalised, when it more acutely or more closely reflects the most frequently occurring climatic circumstance on a grid. Hot and humid. If Mercedes can go well, then Houston, we have ourselves a problem. I mean, you got to learn to live life with regrets. Some say Sir Lewis, and it will get Genie. It doesn't look good for Sir Lewis, but I'm still hopeful. Surprise Stroll and Lando has that. Go on then. I've got to put. Speaking of recanting, speaking of public apologies, your boy Cameron's got to put some respect on Lance Stroll's name. However, his problem has never been driving in the wet. He's always been, conversely, he's always been a demon in wet weather circumstance, has Lance, which is chaos, chat. Who's ever done that in F1? I can't remember ever there being an F1 driver that went better in a more challenging circumstance that is wet and changeable condition. This dude baffles me. Why can't he drive very well in good conditions then in the job? It makes no sense, although I can hear Mr. Peter D. Windsor in my head reminding me, you say that about Lance, that he goes well normally in the wet if past his prologue. But how about Brazil 2024? I seem to recall, is what Peter Windsor would say, he beached himself in the bloody gravel before the race had even kicked off, did himself at Isaac Hadjar. But he was good today, right? Where his teammate, the God tier one, Fernando Alonso, Mr. 4,500,000 years old, when he was beaching it in the Do you know what I mean? He yeeted it into the barrier. Lance Stroll was the Aston Martin guy today. Do you know what I mean? Ugh, I don't know. Can you imagine bloody Adrian Newey looking at that performance thinking, hang on, am I investing all my development eggs in that Alonso basket, or is it Lance Stroll? Stroll redemption for real. Credit to Lance for driving okay in heavy precipitation and snow. Kayla says, what's up, miss? Where's Miss RS? I've missed you, Miss RS. It's techie. Listen, guys, I can't even. We have ourselves. Listen, I'll wrap it up as we round third base with this. It feels good to have F1 back, eh? There were a gazillion questions for which we needed answers. Testing felt like a mirage. Needed to know whether McLaren really have the whip hand, and it looks like they do have the whip hand in terms of absolute pace. That MCL 39 iteration 2025 is quick, and I would argue that the circumstance that was the Australian Grand Prix flattered to deceive as far as the others. Max Verstappen outperformed that RB21. They're more than 2/10 on average quicker, and that might be a problem for the levelling of the competitive landscape. And again, under the umbrella heading that we hope, all F1 fans hope, for a competitive season from race 1 today through to race 24 at Abu Dhabi in 12 months' time. Potentially, the other guys and girls are going to have to develop their way out of this quagmire. I have it that McLaren, on average, are anywhere between 2 and 3/10, potentially 0.4 on the rest of the field. Oh, the humanity, chat. That is a chasm in F1 terms. McLaren have the whip hand, particularly in the hands of one Lando Norris 1.0. If today's performance is anything to go by, listen, I can't wait. Inject it into my veins. We go again at the Chinese Grand Prix in less than 7 days. We'll be back same time, same place tomorrow, 10 a.m. British Standard Time, 8 p.m. British Standard Time, dissecting for all the news, and there will be lots of it now that we've got F1 proper. Your boy Cameron can't keep the smile off himself. F1, we have missed you. How do you like yourselves some of this sport, eh? Techie. Go on, guys. I'm running away. You guys have been legends. Thank you so much for joining. It's been techie, then techie things. But I digress.